was fighting a war. The Spartans invaded Athenian territory and set about burning all the farmland around the city. The Athenians became increasingly anxious. They could only watch from the city walls as their fields and crops were destroyed. But such was Pericles' reputation, he managed to convince the Athenians to stick with his plan. The city could rely on her fleet and shipments from overseas to survive. Little did Pericles know that this fleet now carried an even greater threat. One year into the war, the grain boats that fed the city brought with them an additional cargo: plague. A disease that would now devastate Athens.
Pericles' plan couldn't anticipate difficulties that we now would suggest were rather likely in those circumstances of crowding. And the results were horrendous.
With the population crammed behind the city walls, the affliction spread like wildfire. The symptoms were horrific. The Athenian historian Thucydides, who lived through these years, recorded its effects.
The body was suddenly seized, first with violent heats around the head and redness and inflammation of the eyes, and then the disease descended into the bowels, producing violent ulceration and uncontrollable diarrhea. The sufferings of individuals seemed almost beyond the capacity of human nature.
The city must have looked terrible, smelled terrible, been awful to be in, and terror must have reigned everywhere.
Sufferers, racked with fever and overcome with unquenchable thirst, would crawl into the city cisterns and water mains to die. Thucydides witnessed the scene in Athens streets.
The bodies of dying men lay one upon another, and half-dead creatures reeled about the streets. The catastrophe became so overwhelming that men cared nothing for any rule of religion or law.
The plague's effects on Athens were absolutely devastating. The whole fabric of Athenian society broke down. Morally, people saw no point in being good. Why be good if the good and the evil die just as easily?
The plague would kill over a third of Athens' population. And then it struck the city's figurehead, Pericles. Plutarch, Pericles' biographer, described his symptoms.
The plague seized Pericles, not with sharp and violent fits, but with a dull and lingering distemper, wasting the strength of his body and undermining his noble soul.
By the end, the patrician hero of the city was reduced to relying on potions and magic in an attempt to cure himself.
He showed one of his friends a charm that a woman had hung around his neck, as if to say that he was very sick indeed when he would admit of such foolery as this.
Finally, after 6 months of lingering illness, Pericles died in 429 BC. Pericles had planned to make Athens into the Mediterranean's greatest power. But his carefully calculated strategy had brought only disease and death.
Like most brilliant men, like most people who have had great success all their lives, Pericles simply underestimated the degree to which some things are out of the control of the very best intelligence and the very best knowledge that there are.
Pericles' death would have far-reaching consequences. It soon became clear that this one man had been the linchpin of the Athenian state. Plutarch records that the changes were swift and dramatic.
Those who, while he lived, had resented Pericles' great authority, now realized that he had been the main protector of public safety. So great a corruption and such a flood of mischief and vice followed.
The flaws in Athenian democracy now became apparent. Without a single strong leader, countless figures now scrambled for the top position. And they were prepared to do anything the people wanted if it gave them power.
Pericles' successors, who now wanted to occupy the top position, simply followed the prejudices and passions of the masses in order to gain support.
Athenian democracy now revealed a new and terrifying potential. The potential to slide into mob rule. Crippling her ability to fight a war. With the assembly in the hands of self-interested despots, once mighty Athens began to lose her way.
After the death of Pericles, Athens never again had a political leader with a well-thought-out general picture or a set of goals that he could pursue with reasonable hope of bringing them to fruition.
The war against Sparta degenerated into a bitter, dragging conflict that spread over a decade. The Spartans ravaged the land around Athens, and the Athenian fleet kept the city supplied. Neither side was able to defeat the other. Deprived of victory, the Athenians grew increasingly frustrated. Were they not the greatest state in all of Greece? Surely the time must come for Athens to prove her power once and for all.